Welcome to my budget deck channel, where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. Today with another request, which is Buster Blader. I hope I can do the deck justice. This is just like an attempt at making the deck cheapish while still making it work. The problem with this deck is it comes in many ways. It's not very good going second, and it all really basically depends on this specific card. And if you can't find this card, then what you do is mainly stun till you get this card, which with budget kind of traps isn't as easy. And also this card comes with another problem itself. You need a dragon in your graveyard, which you might not always have as well. So let me explain what my train of thoughts was and why I mixed this abomination with armed thunder dragons. But we shall get to this in a minute. First of all, you obviously play a triple Buster Whelp, the card that is the bane of your existence, but also is really helpful for the deck. Very easy to disrupt by hand traps and any other kind of cards. This is why going second doesn't really work. This card is amazing, and it would be even funnier if the effects, the second effects, were not once per turn and only once that turn, because then you could go into stuff like Muddy Mud Dragon with this deck quite easily and summon the Dark Paladin. Like this, you'd have to wait a little bit. Hopefully your Buster Blader stays on board for one turn, then you could still go into Dark Paladin. At this point you probably won't need to anymore, but in theory you still could, because you run one Armed Dragon Thunder level 5, and the card is, like its name says, level 5, so you would be going with a level 1 tuner into Muddy Mud Dragon and actually make it be the Dark Magician, so you can go into Dark Paladin for this one. That's a cheeky combo that you don't really pull off, maybe once in 100 games, but it is possible, and I felt like if it's possible, why not include it in this deck profile. Talking about the Buster Destructions 1 and 2 is what I call them now, because they basically both are worse than the actual good one, but the actual good one is an ultra rare, so I decided not to run them, and I decided not to run them at like a ratio that's higher than 1. You can search them, you can send them to the graveyard and do stuff with it, with your Synchro Monster as well and things. It's not terrible. Neither of the effects are like great, but they both have their options. In this variant, you don't really play for that specifically because Dragon Buster Destruction is the best one, and I feel like there's decks that play this card in combination with the Reunion Carrier, I think, that make way more sense and are way more consistent in pulling it off than Buster Blader is in general. So I didn't include this whatsoever. You could put it in at 1 if you like to. You could play it at 3. There's no limits to your imagination, only limits to your budget. One Ash Blossom because you basically get it for free, so I don't really count it as an ultra rare, and it's a great card going first or going second. Okay, for the Armed Dragon package, hear me out. This is in here because it easily gets you a dragon into the graveyard while deck thinning as well. And in theory, if you stun your opponent for one turn with your Buster Blader Fusion plus Synchro combo, you could go into Armed Dragon level 7, nuke your opponent's board, and then go for game, which I'll talk about in a second how you do that. But this card also, if it gets sent to the graveyard by its effect, then you can draw a card, which is quite nice. Plus it doesn't even have to send for its own effect dragon monsters to the graveyard, but just monsters, and a Buster Blader in your graveyard isn't necessarily terrible as well. Sadly, it can send trap cards to the graveyard, would make it even better if it was any card, not just monster cards, but be that as it may, the Thunder Dragon package is okay. If you want to run something that is a little bit better and actually helps you while putting a dragon into the graveyard, then go for stuff like Quick Launch, the whole Rocket package, triple Quick Launch, triple Tracer, 1 Magna Rocket or any level 4 rocket monster is enough, and 1 Boot Sector Launch plus 1 Striker Dragon will achieve the same kind of thing. You'll have a dragon in the graveyard by the end of the combo, and also you will have 1 Borload Savage Dragon, which is negate, because you actually have 1 Link monster in your graveyard. So it would work as at least one-time negate, and it's a lot better than the Armed Dragons, but the Armed Dragons feel funnier and are a lot more budget, so I left it at that. Triple Buster Blader because, well, you kind of want them that many times. You can summon them out of the hand with Buster Whelp. Sadly, you can't search them with Buster Whelp. You can only search this one, which you then cannot summon out of the hand because its name isn't Buster Blader in your hand. So there's this neat little thing that you can't do, but wish I could do. You need it for the fusion, and it's not terrible to have in hand a lot of the time. Plus you have a lot of cards to discard, so it doesn't really hurt you all that much. We run triple Pot of Prosperity. Like I said, it is important that you get this card, and your extra deck doesn't really matter in this deck. So yes, I would definitely recommend running this at 3, especially since you're aiming to go first. The whole you can't deal damage doesn't hurt you that much, plus this deck, besides the effect of Armed Dragon Thunder level 3, doesn't have any card draw really, so you don't miss out on that either. A triple Armed Dragon Flash, you could go into stuff like Romulus to link things off to get dragon monsters in the graveyard, which leads us to the next point. You want to be running this card, but it's not crucial to the deck's existence. This would make the deck a bit better in a certain circumstances, especially since you can summon out another monster from your deck, so you can go into Link 2s, which a lot of the time you couldn't really in the Dragon Buster deck. Well, not Dragon Buster, Buster Blader. The whole dragon theme gets me a bit riled up because it has nothing to do with the cards. This card is nice because you can just use any 2 monsters. It would even work with stuff like Paleozoics. So I would run it instead of Romulus, because Romulus has no actual use in this deck. It's just so you can get rid of your dragons and get them into the graveyard, which can be problematic. So if you have this card or want to use the ultra rare on it, I would highly recommend you do that. For the trap lineup, Raigeki Break, if you ever need to get rid of stuff like spell traps, because this card can target any card and destroy it, because Paleozoics can only do that with face-up cards, so this would be a bit better if it's against back row, but in the end it doesn't really matter too much. Destruction Sword Flash is one of your combo pieces. If you have this card with this card, then you should be set, unless your opponent runs a back row heavy game, back row heavy deck, because then you can nuke your opponent's boards at the end of the turn, and then go into your Xyz place and finish your opponent off because they don't have a board anymore, which is quite nice. Plus the targeting protection is quite neat. Could bump this card down to 2, but I actually did like it at 3, especially if you can't get your combo out, then most of the time you've lost anyway, so the whole thing of not running your fusion, not having your fusion on board isn't too terrible, because yeah, usually you're kind of counted down at this point anyway. Paleozoic Dynamiscus is a nice card that discards as well, which helps you get dragons into the graveyard, which helps you get Buster Bladers into the graveyard, and can actually disrupt your opponent in their place quite a lot. I ran 2 Destruction Swords memories, but you can actually run 3 if you like to. You can only use them basically twice, because you only have 2 fusion monsters in your extra deck. So this doesn't do any Buster Blader fusion, but specifically this one, sadly, so you couldn't even use it with Dark Paladin, sending Muddy Mud Dragon to the graveyard with stuff like Dogmatica Punishment, sadly, but if you could, that would be even funnier. Triple Prologue, obviously, you would run probably 10 copies of this card if you could, which you're trying to, with the next card Trap Trick, which is also good because it can search your stuff like Destruction Sword Flash. So I like running this actually at 3, because if you draw into it once, if you run it at 2, then you can not really do the effect anymore. So at 3 it's quite nice, opens you up for more opportunities to actually play your combos. Run a double Guard Dragon Cataclysm, because you have like 9 ways to actually normal summon a dragon, plus your actual busters, so you can actually have 11 ways of normal summoning dragon in this kind of deck. So being able to tribute 1 because you want them in your graveyard anyway, and popping 2 of your opponent's cards can be quite strong, especially against back row decks. Dogmatica Punishment, I used to run it up more, but in this specific version, since you want to be going for game with the Xyz monsters, it hurts the deck more than it does in maybe different versions of Buster Bladers, especially if you run them with Dogmatica. You can switch this card out for another Solemn Judgment if you have one, or another Solemn card, because the Solemn cards in general are quite good. But this card just is a 1-for-1 in the sense of it gets rid of one of your opponent's cards. If you have Entis, put it into the extra deck as well. There's some payoffs that this card has in your extra deck like this. It's not as good as it can be, but obviously the payoffs are a bit more on the expensive side. Solemn Judgment, very good card, stops your opponent from blowing up your board, which will happen one way or another. Sadly, this is one of the weaknesses of this deck. If your opponent has any kind of spell trap card removal for your monsters, then you are screwed. So these kind of cards would be coming in handy. Already talked about Dark Paladin, not really summonable unless you go for a very unlikely combo with Muddy Mud Dragon from Buster Whelp plus Armed Thunder Dragon level 5, and you have a Buster Blader on board, because this doesn't fuse with your hand for some reason. This fuses only with materials that you control, which is a bit annoying. Otherwise it would have been a lot better, or if it could use stuff from the graveyard, but it cannot, so this is what it is. Avenging Knight Parsha is a level 8 monster that doesn't cost much, and sometimes targeting one face-up monster your opponent controls and changing it to attack position can help you end the game. If you're if you've caught out your opponent with your Buster Blader combo, they'll get put to defense position, which obviously stops you from OTKing most of the time, unless for some reason your Buster Blader has you're playing against a dragon deck with 10 cards in the graveyard and so on. This card can actually put one of your opponent's monsters back into the attack position, and then you can OTK it with the Xyz package. Buster Dragon just needed anyway for the whole combo as well, plus sometimes the whole effect can actually come in handy with the whole Buster Blader stuff as well. So you will see Buster Blader, or its I want to say better version, but not really, on board sometimes, so that is nice. Giant Castle is a card that can get over 3000 attack, and you can also make it, since it's a cheap level 9 synchro. Obviously you want to be running the better ones, but if you don't have them, this is at least a card you could run. And the Xyz package I've been talking about so much, you want to go into Draglubion with your fusion monster and your synchro monster, because they're both level 8s during your opponent after your opponent's turn. So you can then summon out this card, which isn't ultra rare, but it is worth running it because it does close games for you by itself, and it supports the kind of strategy you are actually going for, because this card then will have, with this card on board, 9000 attack. This card you can summon, but it's mainly just there to prove a material for the number 100. And then if you nuke your opponent's board with stuff like Destruction, Sword Flash for example, or even Armed Dragon level 7 sometimes, then you can go for game and attack with 9000 attack points, which also helps you get a mission done where you have to do more than 8000 damage, I think, with one card. So this card has multiple uses, and it is really one of the ultra rares that you want to be running in this deck to make it like a bit better than Buster Bladers sadly are. Linkuriboh is a card that helps you get your Buster Whelp into the graveyard. You don't have to run it, but you will run into more scenarios where you don't have a dragon in your graveyard, but you have Prologue. So don't need to run it if you really struggle on ultra rares, but this is a card that can come up in a lot of other decks that run level 1s and stuff. It's not terrible, but you could run Almirage instead. Same thing, this card also might come up if you're into a normal summon Alistair, then this card could be a thing possibly. There's an argument made for both. I preferred Linkuriboh, but also because I had it, so that was the easier choice. If you want, you can run either of them, or you can go for none of them and just hope that doesn't matter too many times. And obviously Dragunity Knight as a link monster that just gets your dragons into the graveyard by linking them off, which is fine. Hopefully you enjoyed the deck profile. The deck, I would say, is somewhat competitive if you can go first and get your combo off. Then a lot of opponents' decks cannot really do stuff. You will hurt a few combo decks. Eldritch, not so much, but combo decks at least. And you can actually steal a few wins even in Platinum. Still, if you go second though, yeah, deck that's half traps will not do that well unless you have some way to survive your opponent's next turn. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile, and most importantly, I hope you have a good day.